I don't know about you, but this whole bilingualism thing has reached a point where, you know what, I'm prepared to say, let's scrap the Official Languages Act and get back to reality. I mean, if we're spending billions, not millions, but billions, to ensure that John Baird doesn't have a business card in English, or to ensure that people don't have to travel the Queensway to get to work, then you really got to wonder why in the world we want people in 9 provinces to be bilingual while the 10th province, Quebec, becomes more and more unilingual. What's this all about? I mean, when you examine what's really happening, you've got to conclude that the main reason we want everyone in Ontario to speak French and English is so that Quebecers only have to speak French. Our language commissioner is going to decide whether transferring workers from Orleans to Ottawa's West End is legal under the Official Languages Act. This is just after he blasted John Baird for having 2 sets of business cards, one set in English only, the other bilingual. Now, all of this wouldn't be so hard to take, except for the fact that on this side of the river, we're chasing down business cards, while Quebec is determined to wipe the English language from the face of the province. More than 250,000 Anglos have already been driven out of Quebec, mostly because of the draconian racist laws, while the latest poll indicates 42% of the few Anglos left in the province want to leave. But not a peep about this. Not a peep from the Office of the Official Languages, or any place else for that matter.
Not a word from Commissioner of Official Languages Graham Fraser, who is supposed to be the language commissioner for both of Canada's so-called official languages, not just the French. Not a word from Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who is supposed to stand up for the rights of all Canadians, not just the French. Not a word from Liberal leader Bob Rae, who is supposed to be one of the opposition voices standing up for the rights of all Canadians, not just the French. Not a word from Green Party leader Elizabeth May, who's supposed to be a champion for all that is right and good for all Canadians, not just the French. Not a word from Thomas Mulcair, Thomas, who is supposed to be the official federal opposition minister and a voice for all rights for all Canadians, not just the French.
While in Quebec, the word hamburger on your office wall can get you fined up to $20,000. Honest to God. And God help you if you'd like to have your child educated in English. And just to rub salt into our wounds, Quebecers elected a government which promised openly to further discriminate against the tiny English minority, and the NDP ranks in the province are littered with separatists and worse. Just freaking beautiful. This is the kind of crap that we're supposed to put up with. But I tell you, I don't know about you, but I'm just getting fed up with this. I mean, this is so damn stupid. Talking about this whole, Office of the Language Inspector or whatever the hell, I mean, holy smokes. Now, Julian Fantino, he speaks only English. He is the International Cooperation Minister. He is under investigation. How do you like that? Under investigation. Is this Soviet Russia? Not quite. What's he under investigation for? Well, look, he said, I only speak English, so, I can't read French or Swahili or Mandarin or Farsi. I can only speak English and read English, okay? It's just the way I am, way to God made me. So there's no sense in sending me stuff that's in another language. So just send me, if you want me to approve something here, you want me to review it or whatever, just send it in English. Spare yourself all the trouble and expense of translating this into 7 different languages. Holy jumping jeepers. He's now in big trouble, under investigation. He's being raked over the coals in the House of Commons. Well, the idea was, and it was a very noble idea, was that, English and French, they're the ones who settled this country. They should have equal status under the law and the language as well. And I supported that. The idea was that this would mean that Francophones would feel comfortable here, Quebec wouldn't leave, Quebec would be very happy to be part of Canada, etc. But it hasn't worked out that way. All it's worked out as Quebec today, if you're an Anglo in Quebec, you're a leper. They don't want you there, sir. I'm not saying everybody in Quebec, but I'm saying that generally speaking, Francophones don't want Anglophones in the province of Quebec. Can we be very, very frank about that?
And absolutely, frankly speaking, I agree with you. But the fact is, even my family, who were at one time residents here and helped build this country up, have abandoned ship when all those other hundreds of thousands moved out their head offices and everything. And in fact, even till today, suggest that I may have some mental deficiency trying to fight the battle here. But
well, people, the fact is, though, if you look at it, Frank, the battle is pretty well over. There's not very much opposition anymore in the province of Quebec. Let's face reality, okay? The reality is that when Pauline Marois introduced Bill 14, which is the most draconian law, I mean, let's be very frank here, sir. Stalin would be very proud of Bill 14.
yes, it would.
You know what? There was very little protest in Montreal. A maximum of about 200 people showed up, most of them well over the age of 60, and that was pretty well it. Well, what I'm saying, sir, is that, look, it's over. The battle is over. The Anglos in Quebec have lost. Now maybe it's time that the Anglos in the rest of the country stood up and said, wait a minute, hold it. Let's just have another look at this. Why are we doing this? Got to move on here, Frank. Thank you, sir. Clifford, you're on CFR. Good morning, Clifford.
Morning, Mr. Green.
Yes, sir.
I think basically people should sit down and think just basically about the cost of official bilingualism. It's billions and billions of dollars for a system that basically hasn't worked. Another point I'd like to make is it's all about the 75 federal seats in Quebec. I think it all boils down to that.
Well, not anymore, I don't think. I mean, the Conservative, the reigning government got only 10 seats there. We now find out that we don't need Quebec, and with redistribution is even less need. You know, a federal party doesn't need Quebec in order to attain power anymore. The balance of power has really shifted westward here.
Yeah, well, I asked, with regards to official bilingualism, I was asking Jack McLaren here one time if you could propose a bill before the provincial legislation and make English the official working language of Ontario. I'd like to see somebody with a backbone and say, look, let's make English the official language. Quebec did it for French, so we should start helping the English people in this province because if you can't speak French, it's going to become more and more difficult to get a job in Canada.
So you really, my point, I'm doing, I mean, obviously I've come full circle on this, and it makes me sad to think of it, but you really have to question why we are doing this. Why? I mean, if Quebecers want who want their language and culture, they have settled pretty well in Quebec now. They have driven the Anglos out. They've created their own nation de facto. So why then are we carrying this on in the rest of the country? You know, I think we just need to re-examine what we're doing here.
Well, do you think, Mr. Green, do you think people in the Ottawa area have enough guts to protest and say, let's make a change and talk to the Conservatives and say we'd like to drop the official bilingualism? Let's base the jobs on merit, and not the language, but on merit, whether you can get a job or not.
I think the debate has finally begun. The fact that I'm carrying it on here without so far, you know, I've got, 2 calls so far, haven't been called a racist. You know, I think that's some sort of an advancement here. And this is not an anti-French thing. I'm directing my comments more to the Anglos. Look, you've given up in the province of Quebec. Those people who really cared have already left. The percentage of Anglos in Quebec now is about 7.5%. 42% of them say that they want to leave. So the battle is over in Quebec. Quebec is going to become essentially a unilingual French territory. Okay, fine. If that's what they want, fine. But then if that's the case, we better re-examine why we want the rest of the country to be bilingual. Exactly what's the advantage of that?
Yeah. Another point I'd like to make is I don't hear any of the French Canadians over there saying anything against when they put Bill 101. None of the French people said, isn't it terrible what we're doing to the English? Not one word, and nothing from our federal politicians as well.
Yes, to a large degree, you're right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Shannon, you're on CFRA. Good morning. Shannon,
Hello?
please. Yes.
Hi there.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity of working in Quebec, in Gatineau, for a few years.
Right.
The only problem I did have was when I asked to speak to a government agency, and I can still quote you what they said to me on the phone was, according to the French language Charter of Rights, we are not allowed to speak to an employer in English.
That's correct. Now, let me ask you, how long ago did you work there, Shannon?
About 3 years ago.
Now, are you aware that today any business with 50 or more employees in the province of Quebec must establish a special committee, a Frankenization committee, to examine, to make sure that all business is being carried on solely in French? This committee is to report on a yearly basis to the tongue troopers in Quebec City. And any transgression, I have a letter here from a former classmate. Get this. This is how bad it is in Quebec. He and the other management people of his business in Sherbrooke reported because guess what? They put up a sign in his office that had the word hamburger and hot dog. It was to announce a company picnic. The hamburgers and hot dogs were free. But because he has more than 50 employees, he was reported. He was grieved by this committee. Now, he could have been fined, believe it or not, up to $20,000 for having these two words in English. And so what happened was they sent not one, not two, but 3 inspectors from the Langue de Française up there. In front of all of the employees, they lectured the management for 1 solid hour. They told the employees that if they ever see another English sign, that this is to be reported immediately and the fine will be doubled.
I'm almost speechless, which is not really a usual thing. All they're doing is promoting bigotry. It's just terrible how.
Whatever it is, we've got to face it. Quebec is headed. They don't want any Anglos there.
But how come then that I, as a English person, have to fight in my own country, in my own city that I was born in, to compete for a job that I'm just as qualified for, maybe than the other person is, but they get it because they're bilingual.
Well,
and I'm
that's
not.
the question I'm asking. Let me ask you another question. We are constantly being told, separation's not a big deal in Quebec anymore. Most Quebecers don't want to separate. And yet they returned, let's be very, very clear here, most of the NDP from Quebec are separatists, poorly disguised. But the reason that separatism is not a big issue in Quebec today is that they don't need to separate from Canada. They have already de facto separated. They have created and are very close to creating the kind of independent nation that they want. They are masters in their own house. The dreaded Anglo, pretty well gone. As I say, the Anglo population, 2011 census, 7.7% list English as the mother tongue. And 42% of them say they want to leave. More draconian measures introduced in Bill 14. It may not be passed in total, but the fact is that the majority of Quebecers voted for this government knowing full well its open promise to further discriminate, boot more Anglos out. So they don't need to leave. They've got all of the advantages of Canadian passports, to wit, $8 billion in transfer payments. Now let me ask you this. The staunchest Federalists who are out there, and I, up until recently, was one. How long do you think most Quebecers would decide that they really are separatists and want to leave Canada if we were to decide to stop the equalization payments? If Canada stopped pumping about $8 billion a year, plus all sorts of other benefits, into the province of Quebec, if we stopped that, how long do you think that most of them would become almost overnight real separatists and state so publicly? This is what happened. What happened, it's very interesting in doing the research, with Czechoslovakia. The Czechs had always been doing much better than the Slovaks, and so there was a kind of equalization payment system there. The Czech part of the country was pouring billions of dollars into Slovakia. So one day they decided a few years ago that they weren't going to do this anymore. Within 2 years, there were 2 independent nations, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And interestingly enough, both doing quite well, particularly Slovakia, which has surprised a lot of people. But how long do you think Quebec would remain in confederation? So the point here is that is this the only thing that keeps Quebec, is the fact that we keep on bribing them? What kind of a relationship is that? The wife only stays with you because you give her, $1 million a week or whatever it is? No other reason? There's no love, no concern, no caring, No affinity, no empathy, just the money. 5218255. Any thoughts on that? Jerry, you're calling me from Buckingham, Quebec.
Yep.
Why don't they want Anglo? I mean, why is there not a place for Anglos anymore in your province?